I always thought the worst thing that could happen in Baraboo was a thunderstorm ruining a football game. I was 13, and life was backyard baseball and comic books. On a humid summer evening in July 1995, that innocence ended. A boy I recognized from school, Joe Clark, rode his bike past my house. He leaned over his handlebars and smiled. "Hey, Thad, my house is having a party. You should come. There's pizza." I hesitated, looked back at my mom folding laundry inside, and said I'd be back soon. The sun sank behind the trees as I pedaled toward the last place I would walk on my own 2 legs for months. Joe lived less than 2 blocks away. I'd seen him at school, but we weren't friends. When he opened his front door, the house was dark and empty. "Where is everyone?" I asked. He shrugged and said we'd hang out in his room while we waited. We went upstairs. His room smelled like sweaty socks and dirty laundry. When I turned around to ask another question, he punched me so hard in the stomach that I collapsed. Before I could catch my breath, he jumped on me, twisting my leg until I felt a crack and lightning-hot pain shot through my body. "Why are you doing this?" I screamed. He smiled. I like to hear them snap. Joe snapped my left femur, then my ankle, then the other leg. He used his hands, his feet, anything he could to bend and break. I tried to crawl, but every movement sent stabbing pain through my body. It felt like my bones were made of glass. Blood pounded in my ears. I begged, I cried, I bargained. He laughed, as if breaking bones was just a game. "You're just like the others," he said, almost to himself. I didn't understand then what others meant. I thought if I kept talking he might get tired. He didn't. Hours passed. He bandaged my broken legs with dirty socks, not out of mercy, but to keep me alive. He dragged me down to the basement. Stairs scraped my broken bones. The basement smelled of mildew and fear. Ropes hung from the rafters. Broken bicycles, tools, and boxes littered the space. He laid me on an old mattress and left me there while he went upstairs. Every time I heard the squeak of his footsteps over my head, I held my breath. When he came back, he brought me water, not kindness. "You'd better drink." "I'm not done." He forced me to sleep on my stomach so my broken legs wouldn't swell as much. I could feel my bones grinding against each other. I prayed to pass out, but my body refused. Pain kept me awake. Pain became my only company. At some point, Joe fell asleep upstairs, and I gathered what strength I had left. I crawled across the cold concrete floor to a box of old photos. Inside was a picture of another boy around my age. He was strapped to a chair, his legs mangled. My heart raced. I realized I wasn't the first. Fear pressed on my chest like a weight. I knew then that if I didn't leave, I'd be just another photo. I tried to move quietly, but the ropes dragged and my broken bones scraped the floor, the sounds echoing in the basement. Every second I expected to hear him run down the stairs. I didn't know how long I had before he woke up. I had to escape. On my second night in the house, Joe left to attend a fair. He tied my ankles together but left my hands free. As soon as the door slammed, I started pulling at the ropes. Pain radiated from my legs, but fear numbed it. I dragged myself to the staircase. Each step was agony. At the top, I reached for the knob. It turned. Freedom. But there was a padlock and chain securing it. I crawled to the kitchen, tears and sweat stinging my eyes, and found a butcher knife. I cut at the rope around my ankles until my fingers bled. Finally, it snapped. I dragged my body to the stairs again, using my arms to pull myself up. The back door was locked. The windows were small and barred, but in the living room, I saw a window that was open just enough. I used a chair to crawl up. My legs dangled uselessly behind me as I squeezed through. The drop to the ground looked high. I didn't have a choice. I pushed myself out. For a moment, I hung there, suspended between life and death. Then I let go. I landed in the yard and the impact shot fresh pain through my shattered legs. I bit my tongue so I wouldn't scream. I dragged myself across the grass. Gravel dug into my wounds. I made it to the street. Headlights approached like two bright angels. I waved my arms and whispered, "Please, please." A woman in a car slowed down. At first, she thought I was an injured animal. When she saw me, she screamed. She ran to me with a blanket, her voice shaking. "What happened?" "He broke my bones," I whispered. She called 911. Soon, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. EMTs lifted me onto a stretcher. My legs twisted in ways they shouldn't. At the hospital, doctors counted more than 20 fractures. They put metal rods and screws in my legs. I drifted in and out of consciousness, but every time I woke I told them about Joe. I knew I had to speak before I slipped away. My voice was the only way to catch him. Police arrested Joe hours later, while he was still at the fair. Surgeons repaired my shattered femurs, ankles, and knees. I spent months in a hospital bed, then in a wheelchair. The pain medicine barely cut through the throbbing, but what kept me awake was the memory of Joe's laugh. Police asked me to tell my story again and again. I testified in court. I looked at Joe in his orange jumpsuit and saw no remorse. In my 13-year-old voice, I told the jury how he lured me in, how he snapped my bones like twigs, how he planned to kill me. I described the photo I found in his basement. The prosecutor told me another boy named Chris Steiner had disappeared the summer before, and his body had been found washed up on the Wisconsin River. Joe was suspected but hadn't been charged. My survival changed that. He was convicted of attempted murder and kidnapping. Joe's trial lasted several days, but it felt like an eternity. I watched jurors look at my x-rays. I listened to doctors describe my fractures. Joe sat emotionless. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, I felt both relief and emptiness. He was sentenced to over 100 years in prison. People called me a hero. I didn't feel like one. I felt like a kid who had lost a summer, my innocence and the carefree trust I had in my neighbors. The prosecutor said Joe might have killed me and more if I hadn't gotten away. That thought haunted me. I went home with my parents, metal rods in my legs and scars inside and out. The road to recovery would be longer than any trial. Physical therapy was hell. My legs trembled with every attempt to stand. I learned to shift weight onto my hands and arms. I wore braces and used crutches. Each step was a victory and a reminder of what Joe tried to steal. My friends would visit and tell me about school. I felt both grateful and angry. Kids whispered about the Bonebreaker, some with curiosity, some with fear. Adults looked at me with pity. I wanted them to see that I was alive, not broken. My parents drove me to therapy appointments, cheering at my smallest gains. The love in their eyes gave me strength when my legs refused to cooperate. The physical scars healed, but nights were the hardest. I'd wake up sweating, my heart racing as if Joe was in my room. I heard his laughter and the creak of the house. My hands would shake when I walked past the empty lot where his house used to be. I started talking to a counselor. She helped me understand that survival was more than living. It was reclaiming my mind. I drew pictures of the basement, the rope, the photo album. Each drawing was a way to pull them out of my head. The nightmares came less often. I listened to rock music and punk, anything with loud drums to drown out the memory of bones snapping. Years passed. I grew taller. My legs healed, but they always hurt when it rained. I returned to school and caught up with my classes. People asked me to speak about what happened, to help them understand how I survived. At first I refused. Reliving the worst night of my life felt like reopening a wound. But I realized that by telling my story, I could keep Joe from becoming a monster in the shadows. I spoke at schools, telling kids not to go with people they barely knew, even if they offered pizza. I told them to trust their instincts. My voice shook, but it was strong enough. People called Joe Clark a predator, a monster. To me, he was a human being who chose evil. Understanding that helped me let go of some of my anger. I refused to let one person define my life. I volunteered with a support group for victims of violent crimes. Hearing others' stories reminded me that I wasn't alone. I still have metal rods in my legs. Sometimes they hurt when I climb stairs. But each step is a reminder of my will to live. If there's one thing I want people to know, it's that survival isn't about what happens to you. It's about what you do afterward. My name is Thad Phillips, and I survived Joe Clark, the Bonebreaker. He broke my bones, but he didn't break me. I still carry the physical reminders of that night, plates and screws, scars and aches. But I also carry gratitude. Gratitude for the woman who stopped her car and saved me. Gratitude for the doctors who put me back together. Gratitude for the chance to live and to tell you this story. Maybe you're listening because you've survived something too. If so, know that your story doesn't end with what someone did to you. It begins when you decide to keep going.
Thank you so much for spending time with this story. If it resonated with you and you'd like to hear more real-life survival tales, please tap the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It's a big help and lets me know you're enjoying this kind of content. I'd also love to know whose story you'd like me to cover next. Drop your suggestions and thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement keeps the channel alive, and I appreciate every single one of you for listening. Stay safe, and I look forward to sharing another story with you soon.